Hello to all my friends and family, and welcome to Jim's 5am Club. I come to you from wharf number 6 here at Circular Quay on this gorgeous spring afternoon. It's Friday, it's the day before the weekend. I've finished work and I'm about to head home, but before I kick off and go home, I just thought I'd go on a bit of a walk and talk and a chat because I'm feeling a touch nostalgic today. Don't know why, but I do feel nostalgic, so I thought I'd talk about a subject which is probably close and dear to my heart, and that's about my Greek heritage and my battles and conflicting challenges of trying to understand and to connect with friends and family who are also Greek. But based on my journey from a very young age, you do start to learn as the years go that a person's nationality is a quite a fluid and a quite a general sort of definition. And what I mean by that is that with time I'm starting to appreciate that, say for example, my Greekness. My Greekness is something which is hard to define, hard to describe, because there are many ways of being Greek, is what I've learnt over the years. When I was young, of course, there were a few ways of being Greek, and it was based on the family values that my parents, grandparents, uncles and aunts who had migrated to Australia taught me. But with time and with the years, I'm starting to appreciate that there's more than one way of being Greek. And depending on who you speak to, depending on who you associate with, depending on who you socialise with, you will learn that there's a blurred line, there's a very blurred area, there's a grey area which crosses everybody's definition. And I think we all face the same challenges, and I don't think that I'm alone. But what I'm starting to learn now is whenever I speak to somebody and they tell me they're Greek, I'm more inclined now to ask them, which version of Greek are you? Just to put things into perspective, Greece has a wonderful history, a long, wonderful history, which spans at least 3,000 years that we're aware of, and it goes well beyond that. But what I've found is over the years, especially after I went to university and started socialising with people from different parts of Greece, from different classes in terms of where they came from, how they grew up, their schooling, their education, you tend to understand that there are very many versions of Greek. And when I look back over history, the Greeks have always been divided, very divided, so much so that in ancient times, 2500 BC or thereabouts, there were 1,500 Greek states, all independent of each other, all competing against each other, and all trying to vie for a place in the world, and to not only define themselves, but to help define and redefine the people and the states around them. So we go from ancient times where they were polytheistic, there were multiple gods, But as a monk from Mount Athos once told me, and I found it quite powerful, he said, there was never a time in the history of time, or the history of Greek time, where Greeks were not deeply religious. So I'll come to that point later on. But Greece has been through a long history with many challenges. It's fought many wars against many countries. It's been occupied by many countries and cultures over time, and it's fought back and it's gained its freedom. So not only has Greece significantly changed the world in terms of culture, education, sciences, in many, many areas, but Greece has also morphed itself and changed itself time and time again based on its interactions, its trade connections with other parts of the world, and it's morphed. It's morphed over time and it's changed. So much so that Herodotus, in his histories, talks about the impact and the influence that other cultures had on Greeks, i.e. the Egyptians, with their worship of their gods and their deities, heavily influenced the way the Greeks worshipped gods and deities. But it's a contentious point because depending on who you speak to, they all have their opinion, they all have their ideas, and so it's a moot point as to who influenced who. But we'll just go on and say that when we look today at modern Greece, my parents, my grandparents, they came to Australia and they brought to Australia a version of Greece from the 1950s, and so did their friends and families, but each brought a different version, a different episode of their Greekness, depending on whether or not they were from the mainland, they were from islands, whether or not they were from the mountains or the seaside, whether or not they were educated or less educated. You know, depending on where you came or how you were brought up and what your family history was, also influenced the way you saw the world. Greece went through World War I, World War II. It was occupied by the Germans, the Italians, for many years. Many of the islands were occupied by the Italians for many years, and hence they would have taken on a significant influence from the Italians through that occupation. The other thing that I wanted to also say was that Greece also went through civil war, where the communists and the monarchists were bitterly opposed and battled for control over Greece, and it was an immense power struggle. So I'll come to the other point where we talk about the modern Greece from 1821 onwards. The thing that I find quite fascinating is that the Greek flag has as its subject, has as its focal point the cross, the Christian cross. And yet, even today, when you speak to Greeks, you'll find that there are many different versions of Greeks, just like there are many different software upgrades to the Apple phone or models of Mercedes-Benz. So too, even today, there are many different versions of Greeks. I'm really, really surprised that in today's world, you can speak to people and they talk to you as if they've come from ancient Greece. They talk about the Greek gods, they talk about ancient Greece as if they are direct descendants of ancient Greece. And it's quite odd, considering that Greece has moved on from those ancient times. They are a Christian country. They are in many ways the crucible of modern day Christianity, given that the Gospels and the epistles were written in Greek, were translated into other languages from Greek, have been encapsulated in Greek. The first 1,000 years of the Christian church was debated and communicated and preached in many ways using Greek thought and the Greek language. And yet there are people today who are not necessarily Christian and still claim that they're Greek. There are people who are agnostic. There are people who are atheists and still claim to be Greek. So it just goes to show that one's Greekness can be defined in many different ways. I've been fortunate to have been on Facebook with a number of Greek groups, and the debates, the aggression that you see against Greek just shows that we haven't really moved on all that far from the civil wars of the late 1940s, where brother would kill brother, villager would fight villager, and there was tremendous disunity in Greece during the civil war. And once again, the civil wars of Greece, one could also argue, are no different to the Greeks of the ancient Greeks, where we'd have 1,500 different states, all with their own leaders, all with their own armies, all with their own currencies, and operating independently of each other and against each other. You know, you've got the Peloponnesian Wars, which went on to define Greece in ancient times, where the Greeks spent more time fighting each other than fighting off other threats. But one thing for sure and for certain, you know, there were people who helped unite Greece in the past, like Alexander the Great, who did it fleetingly for a slight moment in time. But I guess we could all probably say with great confidence that even today, you know, to think of Greeks as being united is quite funny and farcical, given that you know, you put 10 of us Greeks into a room, and we can possibly never agree on any point, be it religion, be it politics, be it history, be it you name it. You talk about it and there'll be conflicting and opposing views, which in a way is an advantage, because if Greeks weren't like that, then under 400 years of rule by the Ottomans, we'd probably still be ruled by the Ottomans. But because of our stubbornness, because of our one-upmanship, because of our zest and zeal to be different from each other and to contest one another and to be uncontainable, has meant that Greece has survived up until today, even if its survival is broken up into 10 or 15 million different versions. So I guess that's probably what I wanted to talk about, and there's nothing wrong with that. I remember when my kids were growing up, there was a song, an Australian folk song that played, which basically celebrated the fact that from an Australian perspective, there are 20 million ways to define an Australian. But that song was written, of course, back in the days when there were only about 20 million Australians, whereas today, when there's about 25 million, you could probably say, or you could say with great confidence, that there are 25 million ways you can define what an Australian is and not be wrong, because each person is different, completely different in many ways, and yet each claim to be Australian. And similarly, from a Greekness, from a Greek perspective, many people claim their Greekness, claim to be Greek, and many of us claim to have a Greekness who were never born in Greece. There are many who have never visited Greece, and yet their Greekness, you can see, is alive and well, even if their version of their Greekness is much different from everybody else's version. So feel free to celebrate and express your version of Greekness, regardless of what it is, because the Greeks were very much into free thought, free expression, and all the freedoms, and the study of aesthetics and philosophy. Even the schools of philosophy were all diametrically opposed to each other, and would always challenge each other, challenge thought. So as you can see, over time, the whole concept of our history, of our Greekness, has been quite nebulous, and yet there is something there that we can all claim, something there that we can all touch and feel. Don't know what it is, I don't know how to put my finger on it, but it in each of us, I feel, is a different combination, a different recipe, but it all tastes the same, it all feels the same, even though it doesn't all look the same. Anyway, let's finish up with a positive affirmation. I'm alive, I am well, and I feel absolutely great. To my friends and family, thank you for joining me on today's version of Jim's 5am Club, because it is a challenging one, because I am on occasion conflicted in terms of what I understand, what I believe, in terms of who I am, and I'm sure we all are the same, especially the many Greeks of the great diaspora that appear and express their Greekness in virtually every country of the world. Anyway, let's finish off, and I thank you for taking the time to join me. Γεια σας, σας αγαπάω, ζήτω η Ελλάς, and feel free, as I said before, to express, live and celebrate your version of Greekness, and encourage your children to do the same. Wishing you all the best and have a great weekend, and until we chat again, I look forward to coming to you again from another location with another message to help us get through the day, get through the morning, and help us look at our life and our individual circumstances with strength and power. Bye for now. Γεια σας.